Hi everyone, welcome to Show Studio Panel Discussion. I'm your host, India Rosso, and today we're going to talk about the recent debut that just happened in New York Fashion Week about the brand Helmut Lang with Peter Du as new creative director. So let's just start with a round of introductions. Harry, do you maybe want to start?
Sure. My name is Harry Tibble. I am 25 years old and I run a fashion archive and retail store called La Nausée. We have a showroom in Camberwell. I started it about 3 years ago with my good friend Ross, and we've been in the studio for 1 year. It used to be in my apartment, so I'm glad to have some more space. And we have some old Helmut Lang there, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
My name is Lauren Wyper. I'm the founder of Phoenix, the agency, a model and talent agency based in central London.
Rudy?
My name is Rudy Simba Betty. I'm a stylist and consultant, and I work between Paris and London.
Great.
Hi, I'm Joshua Graham, and I'm the editorial assistant here at Show Studio.
Amazing. So just to kind of start with a general question to everyone and kind of give a little bit of background about the brand Helmut Lang. As we all know, Helmut Lang has a rich history and it's known for its minimalistic aesthetic. How would you describe the core elements and core values of its DNA?
I think it's sexy. I think Helmut Lang from really captured from that mid-90s to early 2000s moment this really kind of sultry, languid, hedonistic sex appeal, but in a way that was so, again, minimal and refined. It wasn't that ostentatious, in-your-face 80s opulence thing. It was finding sensuality in like how you style a suit or how you unbutton your shirt. I think, to me, Helmut Lang has always been a super sexy brand.
Yeah, I agree. What does the brand mean to you personally?
Oh, that's a good one. Anyone else go first? I need to think about that.
Sex. Helmut Lang is a sexy brand. I think what Helmut Lang did in the 90s was just like sultry and hedonistic, and he made the ordinary everyday uniform into something that was so alluring. Like if you saw someone walking down the street in the 90s in full Helmut Lang, they were just immediately hot, right?
Kind of it is.
I agree.
Sex and the City, in that one episode that Samantha did a makeover of the most undateable guy ever, the first thing she did was take him to Helmut Lang and give him a full makeover. And I think that just speaks to that sex appeal that, as a designer, Helmut Lang was like so revered for.
It's like almost like a landscape of what you would think cool 90s New York would look like. And I think, I jump on the sexiness of it. It's almost like subversive, to have like created almost like a uniform look, but then with accents of subcultures, sex, even like different,
I think in terms of what it means to me, it was the first brand that kind of got me interested in vintage designer clothing. At the age of like 15 or 16, I bought my first pair of Helmut Lang jeans, and I still have them today. So that's 10 years ago, and they still are wearable, but are full of holes. But I mean, when I first got into it, I was cherry picking things and like more like looking at like the bondage jackets or like the aviator trousers, which was really great. But I think as time has gone on, I've dived way deeper into what it means to like Helmut Lang and what his whole language was, and it's really interesting to see the development over all the collections. I think it's a really special brand to spend a lot of time looking at, and I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon. So it means a lot to me. It kind of got me into what I was into, and maybe moved to London and study fashion. So yeah, it's a very personal brand to me.
I think that's a really apt way to define the brand, because when you read kind of profiles or think pieces from the 90s and early 2000s talking about Helmut Lang, I think there was typically always a part of it that was, he was always striving to perfect a garment. There's always this like timelessness to his design that, decades later, people still covet these clothes.
Yeah, I think that owning a piece of original Helmut Lang when Helmut was at the helm, you're literally owning a piece of fashion history. So to me, that's so powerful, you know, it's poignant.
Well, going back to your point with the, with the timelessness of it, from collection to collection, he would put the same T-shirt down the runway, but he would cut a bit from the crew neck or cut a bit from the sleeve, and it's like the small attention to detail there that is really difficult to find in collections these days. People have to, go all out to catch people's attention, but people were so interested in the small details that he was perfecting over time. I don't think he really was thinking too much about what other people thought. He was just like, damn, that T-shirt was shit last season. Let me make it better again, or let me put it in a different fabric for winter. Let me make it in wool or something. So there's just there's so much to it, and I think it's a really interesting brand to look way further, just not just at the 90s, even at the early 80s stuff as well. So
it's like the idea of simplicity that you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like in terms of influential designers, all the way up to here, we can see like everyone kind of eating from it and being inspired.
Definitely.
20 years later,
Definitely.
30 years later.
I think he created like a language, and many designers have tried to emulate that and never quite got to him.
And Harry, to come back to the things that you just said, why is the brand's archive, and we're talking, of course, pre-Helmut Lang, so pre-Helmut Lang leaving, so before 2005, still have so much relevance and appeal to the fashion community still now?
I think because he was making really honest clothing, and he was the first menswear designer to kind of push the contemporary style, and that was really revolutionary for men at that time. They were like, it was the first time that they were able to wear like a tank top with their nipple showing, like a straight guy would do it. And it's like, before that, it was to do something like that was super outlandish. And there's probably almost 10,000 items that he made over his time. So there's so much to unpack. And there's so much to look back and archive and kind of dissect for people. So I think that's why it's so relevant. And it came at a perfect time. It came, in the early 2000s. We had so many like designers who were pushing so heavy, Miu Miu or Margiela or someone like this. Around that time, it was a lot of focus was on fashion, and a lot of focus was on new designers. So I think that helped people's interest divert to that area, and Helmut Lang was one of the best to do it. So I think that's why we always look back, and why someone like myself finds so much joy looking back at the clothes. It just felt super honest, and the references that he were making, they weren't references from necessarily other designers. It was more like architectural or like military from like the early 1900s or something like that. So it was people were learning through his clothes, and they were learning about other things, not just how to wear something. It was more philosophy. I think that's why people keep going back.
Definitely.
Philosophy is a really good word when I'm talking about Helmut Lang and the archive, because I think it really, the reverence and the love and the cult following that it really still has today is all about his philosophy and that world building behind it. And yes, it was fashion and it was really of a moment, but there was also such a functionality to it. It was, buttons were placed in places because of how you're going to live in it, how you're going to spend your day in this suit or these trousers. There was no frivolity, I think, in Helmut Lang's designs.
I think there's an accessibility there, which is why there's such a cult following. People can resonate with the brand for sure.
Also, in general, it's also just a mood. It's such a great atmosphere and ambience that he created around his name and his brand, and you kind of want to be part of this. And I feel like this generation especially, like there's a really reverence towards the greats of before, and you kind of want to live within the same kind of energy and mood. And
it was so authentically cool. I think today we need to really bring back the word poser, because I think they're all around us. But at this time, I think you would just look at the show and the people who go to the show and the people in the ad campaigns and how it was marketed and think it's just so different from everything that's going on in fashion.
That's the thing with the shows itself, like, and maybe I'm gonna make a mistake, but every show was like the walls were white and the models walked down in their clothes, and that was it. You know, there wasn't any like grand performance. So people were, you know, he was diverting people's attention to look at the details, and I think that was a fresh feeling for people to like not have to look. Like Versace doing this massive grand performance or something like this, guys were able to look at the runway and be like, wow, that suit and that button and that pleat or something like that, it's really interesting, rather than be overly distracted. So it became about the clothes, but then through that people realized it wasn't about the clothes. It was like a kind of like a segue into the world. So yeah.
And Josh, so basically we know that Helmut Lang had his peak in the 90s and then kind of went on a downfall when Helmut Lang himself left. So how kind of the fashion landscape changed since Helmut Lang's peak until now?
I think, for me, I think about this the downfall of why maybe people get jaded about fashion, but it was definitely around that time when the conglomerate boom was really hitting. It's when fashion became less about creativity and world building and philosophy and more about marketing, more about selling, building a brand that is not only global, but bringing in X amount of dollars year after year. And the second it isn't, it scares people. If you look at Prada Group, who ended up buying Helmut Lang
For 1 year.
for 1 year, right? And before that, there was the whole Jill Sander issue. I think that focus on marketing and that focus on brand building versus world building scares genuine creatives. I think it scared Jill Sander out of her own brand twice. And I think it spooked Helmut Lang. I think he saw this as the apex of what he wanted to do with his name and his brand and moved on, which I think actually more people should do.
Yeah. Just leave it.
Not hang on for dear life.
Yeah, because, and I mean, if you've perfected the contemporary wardrobe, where do you go from there?
He left it, that was a time of magic, and I don't know if anyone's quite, obviously with the turnover with the creative directors that there's been in that time period, anyone's ever quite got back to that magic that he created. And he did, he exited at the right time, I think.
Yeah, but even like that post when he left, I think the direction that the brand was really being pushed in was to be in Nordstrom's and Barney's and sell basics to whoever was still clinging on to the Helmut Lang name, rather than selling an idea or selling a philosophy.
It's funny to see even like him, or when you think of Marta Margiela or Jill Sander, like they kind of exist in similar spheres, and they kind of did the same.
Yeah, they had very similar experiences.
Yeah, and kind of when it became really bigger than just the brand and the product or the image, they just left.
Yeah, when it became less about the clothes and more about everything around it, I think that's when they were like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to make these clothes anymore because no one's interested in it. They want to wear it for a certain reason.
But then it goes back to that accessibility, whereas it's been quite corporate ever since his departure. Hopefully we're coming back to...
We're going to come back to that.
Definitely. Dive forward, of course.
So this is a general question a little bit for everyone, but Rudy, you mentioned Jill Sander or Maison Martin Margiela that at the time were kind of considered competitors of Helmut Lang. So what kind of sets the brand apart from these competitors? Like what were some of the defining moments or collections that kind of elevated that Helmut Lang prominent position in the industry?
I think it's just the fact that I was reading like earlier reviews of his shows and how like early 90s, like people were not, because I think he showed first in Paris and people were not really giving him the time. And when you put everything into context again, there's like, it's the end of, actually not the end, like the peak of maximalism and the big brands and logos and everything. And he kind of ushered in a new era of simplicity, but within that simplicity, I felt like there was perfection of the idea of simplicity and inserts of, as we were saying earlier, like subcultures and fun bits and intellectual bits and artistic bits that kind of felt it was bigger than just creating a minimal aesthetic. And maybe it was just also just perfect timing. When you're like, you represent exactly what your time is just before it becomes this. And
You saw the opportunity and you went for it.
yeah, probably.
In my utopian view, though, I feel like these minimalists didn't care what other minimalists were doing because they were kind of so focused
In what they were,
doing,
100%.
the craft that they were building around that. Even though Margiela was creating really amazing things around the same time and Jill Sander was creating things just years before, I almost hope that they weren't looking at each other like,
I don't
my trousers are better.
I don't think they were.
It was like that.
The clothes wouldn't have been created if they were doing that. You know, if they were looking at each other, they would have emulated each other's work. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I can imagine they weren't like critiquing other people's work and being like, I want to make that trouser better. But in terms of minimalism, I think it's gone in stages. But I think in terms of the entirety of Helmut Lang's work, it's a bit of a backhand to just describe it as minimalist. Like going back to that point, the details might have been small, but they were so important. They had such a maximal effect on the rest of fashion today. People are still going in and taking a specific pocket detail that he used, and back then it was minimal, but now it's like it could be blown up massively and made maximal.
Yeah.
So
But I think that's the real genius with Helmut Lang is that he took small ideas and really made them huge. Button placement became a topic of conversation.
Yeah. And what were your initial thoughts about the appointment of Peter Du?
I was excited.
I think it's a great fit.
Yeah. I think I'm a huge Peter Du fan. I think his work is exciting. It's really refined, especially for his age. It's incredibly desirable. I see these collections and I want to be that person. I want to dress like that when I come to work, even though it's far too expensive. It's gorgeous. I think he has a really great eye for detail. And it just makes it all the more disappointing that this was what we were kind of left with.
I think I wasn't excited, but it made sense to me because I think his own work emulates so much already of what Helmut Lang did. And before getting too deep into it, I just don't think it was necessary for him to separate himself and try and revive a dead brand for 20 years to then, showcase some new techniques or some new things that he's learned about Helmut Lang recently in the last year while he's trying to design this collection. I mean, they designed it in 4 months, which is impressive, but I just think if he really was interested in the ethos of Helmut Lang, he could have just focused a bit more on his own brand and directed those references into his own work. It wasn't necessary, I feel. But.
I think from an individual perspective, I think that there's similarities between Helmut Lang and Peter Du in the fact that I know that Helmut Lang was known for being quite, maybe not the most social creative designer, and I believe that Peter Du has that same quality, and it's very much all about the fashion, and I think that's quite refreshing, as you say, in this day and age where,
I think on the surface level, I agree with that statement, but I still don't really know what Peter Du stands for. I know that he keeps himself anonymous, which is interesting that he would sign up for a really big American brand. There is that quietness, but I've read many an interview with him and they always do a portrait of him, even if it's from the back. I mean, Helmut Lang famously kind of removed himself from fashion as a system, and it ruffled a lot of the industry's feathers. He skipped out on the fashion awards in 2000 and won an award, and everyone in attendance was kind of in awe that he was just down the street working rather than celebrating himself. So on the surface, I do get this idea that Peter Du is doing the shy, creative thing.
Yeah.
I think there's so many instances where it feels
communication
so
as well.
polarity.
it feels like, why are you really doing this? Why are we still wearing a face mask in
Do you
2023?
think that perhaps is for show?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know
Helm.
yet. The
It's a
jury's out.
communication, basically. Even if you decide to say
Marketing,
exactly,
right?
yeah,
And it's
being taken from the
working.
back. Yeah.
Because we're intrigued. We're very intrigued.
I don't think it's I don't know how to put it, but I don't think he does this for just like a marketing purpose or something. I think he's probably his personality is very shy, and just because the world right now is all about marketing and communication, to be honest, and talk to the press and having some images, on the internet. So maybe it's just something that he needs to do anyways,
But that's what's clever, because then you find a way to do it with maybe feels like you, but also you still play the game. And I feel like, as you were saying, like the pictures from the back, it is staging in a great way, but it also is staging and communicating
It's an
something.
interesting point. Yeah.
I mean, looking at the collection, his debut for Helmut Lang, that idea of marketing, I think, is also maybe the most egregious part of the show, in the sense that I think there were a lot of graphics. There were a lot of nods to kind of Helmut Lang as a mastermind in marketing. But to slap it on a t-shirt feels like we could have done this homage in a lot more of a clever way, rather than putting those like pretty much ads on the back of these shirts.
That makes it's an easy way to communicate, right?
It's an easy way to
Someone who
communicate,
doesn't know or doesn't really care that much about Helmut Lang's work, but really likes Peter Doe, is going to go, oh, I remember that taxi ad. They've made it commercial. They've made it
Commercial.
It's probably going to sell.
Exactly, which is why I'm side-eyeing it a little, or being a bit
that's why we.
pessimistic, is that these are shirts that we're going to
I'm
see.
not saying that's a good thing either.
No,
I'm saying
my
that
God,
the
no.
commerciality is.
I think when we talk about the philosophy of Helmut Lang, that to me is so far removed from what he was trying to do with his brand, that, I just thought it was the most egregious part of the collection and the show.
And Laura, what do you think was the intention of hiring Peter Doe?
To sort of breathe new life into the brand, to nail it in a way that hasn't, I wouldn't want to say has failed over the past few years, but it's definitely plateaued. Just give a totally new perspective. I think Peter Doe is an extremely, extremely exciting man, and I think his relevance is, he's extremely relevant at the moment. He's wonderful.
And what challenges does he face on revitalizing this, Helmut Lang's reputation in the industry?
I mean, he was always going to be against it, wasn't he, really? I mean, it's one of the most important brands of our time, really. I think that he needs to remain with the aesthetic of the brand, but also be authentic. I don't think many people execute that very well, so I think that's going to be a huge, huge challenge.
Yeah.
I think he's going to do it.
Maybe a little bit more irreverential, because I feel like it kind of, the collection, I mean, we're going to talk about it a bit more, but it kind of felt like, as you were saying, all the codes were kind of very visible and very there. And the excitement that maybe you get when you hear that he's going to lead the brand now, like it kind of dissipates a little bit when you see that it's very on the nose sometimes.
I definitely think the philosophy of the brand and of the man was way off mark with this debut. But aesthetically, maybe too on the nose.
Yeah.
I think
Too obvious.
too obvious. A lot of the references were
Scratching the surface.
Yeah, scratching the surface. I don't think they were done in very clever or interesting ways. The like the satin side sash panels. I mean,
It's like an obvious reference, like in 1997. I mean, that's like the main season they were showing, but it happened for years. So it's just like a really obvious reference to make. I think if we're going to jump right into the collection, I think to make a reference is one thing, but forgive me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Peter Doe once said that he didn't visit the archive in New Jersey, and I think to make a reference and to not hold the garment in your hand it just doesn't really make sense, because I mean, I haven't held this coat in my hand yet, but I've held the Helmut Lang ones with the sash in my hand, and they feel incredible. But to make it again, it's just it's a really strange thing to do without actually getting that piece and handling it yourself and reproducing it. So that's just one thing. I'm sure there's many more points we have, but that's one thing that I don't like.
Definitely. So, like, what's your general thoughts about the debut, about the collections, the aesthetic, the looks, generally talking?
I mean, can we be specific? Because generally,
specific, of course.
Generally, I didn't like it. I mean, I could sit here and be that stereotypical archive fashion boy and say I didn't like it, and I'm going to do exactly that because I really didn't like it. For one, like these sashes, it reminded me of like an off-white, maybe the off-white belt, the yellow belt, which is a really interesting choice for him to make. You know, you put classic clothes down the runway, a pair of jeans, cool, like that's obvious. It's not hard to make a pair of jeans now. You've got manufacturers in New York making great jeans, but it's just these brown shirts. I have the brown shirt in this color from Helmut Lang. It's like, do we need it again? I don't really think we do.
Those two were my favorite looks. Sure. I think they were absolutely
great looks, but it's like, did we need it? I don't think we needed it. I don't think anyone's going to run to the store and buy these jeans. Or this shirt. Maybe you like the shirt, and I'm sorry, but
I'm not spending my money on that,
but yeah.
I think it's cute. I think this is the direction maybe he should have gone in. I think something needs to be said about restraint. You kind of threw a lot of eggs into the basket with this one.
Yeah, he definitely, I think if you use stuck with those sort of more dusty, neutral tones rather than those like minimal color blocking, I think that was definitely meant to be a statement, but it was just a bit,
It just feels
It didn't feel,
That's the right word to say.
It really felt safe and
Commercial.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it was. And we have to think about really the intention of hiring anyone at Helmut Lang, because I think the intention is to sell clothes.
I mean, they had Shane Oliver for 1 year and they couldn't afford him. So if it happens again, then this guy's not going to make another collection again. So he has to sell clothes and people are going to have to look good in their Instagram pictures. So I think that's why he's made a lot of these simple clothes and very obvious references, because it's just going to it needs to be easily digestible for the new fashion crowd who, for the most part, the people who are going to be buying this don't give a shit about Helmut Lang's work beforehand, necessarily. So.
I'm really curious about what the price point's going to be, because I think Helmut Lang has always kind of rested on this just under unattainable. It was always accessible to some degree. Even post Helmut Lang, they never had this kind of like luxury price increase. And because Peter Do's own label is so luxe and so expensive, I wonder if they're going to view this as an opportunity to hike up the prices a bit.
I think that's quite the opposite, actually. He kind of said that because his own brand is so, as you say, like in that luxury kind of territory, like one of the reasons why he accepted to do Helmut Lang was for it to be accessible, even as a price. So maybe I think there's like a scaling back in how they will price it, because obviously they want to sell. So.
Yeah. And to come back to this point, I read in an interview that Peter Do did with WWD that he aims to transform the brand in as a functional, accessible luxury. So to kind of have that, still give to an individual to purchase the clothes without spending lots of money. But how do you kind of perceive this brand's, this thing with the brand's commitment to like maintaining the quality of the materials as well? Because sustainability is a huge topic right now, and let's not forget that Helmut Lang right now it's under fast retailing as well.
Yeah.
The quality is the most important part of the clothing. So if he wants to make it accessible, the quality is not going to be good. I mean, the warehouses and the production factories these days, compared to them, it's already a shambles. So I mean, if he's going to make it cheap, it's going to be absolutely terrible, because the pieces from 20 years ago are still holding together on the hanger in my studio. So I'm wondering if these clothes will have this anywhere close. And
like maybe
I would.
Maybe the bigger pieces, maybe like a coat or something, we still have.
I would hope so. Yeah. If I'm going to spend 3,000 on a coat, I would hope they would be nice.
Yeah.
And do you think sometimes it's difficult for brands to kind of balance consistency with innovation? Do you think there has been something of this debut that has something innovative? And if so, how?
I don't know about innovative, but the Jenny Holzer reference is quite nice. It made sense, and it's nice that he's working with like another Vietnamese creative. Again, not
Is that Ocean Vuong?
Yeah. So it's nice. It's not innovative, but it was refreshing to see something done, a reference done well. But that's all I have to say on that.
I'm kind of torn between this artistic collaboration with Ocean Vuong because I wish it's about his immigrant experience and what New York means and what being in the city and growing up in the city as an immigrant means for both of them. I kind of wish he kind of imbued that into his collections and added that personal narrative into his own brand. To do it at Helmut Lang, this very beautiful, sentimental message at a brand that I don't think is sentimental or nostalgic feels so out of place. Like it doesn't hit home, I think, the way.
The closest he got was just putting it on a shirt and turning it inside out or reversing it. So it felt like if you're going to do a collaboration like this, it's good to push that energy into the clothes as well, more so than he did. So.
So we all agree that the heritage really impacted this collection, the heritage of Helmut Lang. But do you think there has been some kind of identity that has been expressed through the clothing, Peter Jew's identity, or? I
mean, his identity is largely based off a lot of Helmut Lang work already. So yeah, for sure, you could say that. We had leather, we had color block, and we had vests. That's a staple for Peter Do. So for sure, like these jeans with like the double layers, like he did like the massive distressed denim in his own label. So yeah, there's design elements that he brought into the collection, but they're not new ideas. The ideas that he was putting out on his own label already. So yeah,
it's hard. I feel like to also speak about newness when you think of a brand like Helmut Lang, because it was the definition of new, I guess, in the 90s and 2000s, but again, against the backdrop of the time. And I feel like today, as like in 6 months, a new designer is getting into a brand, and it's really hard to feel new and to bring new ideas in such a short span. And I don't know, I want to feel like it's kind of a palette cleanser and that there's more to come, because it feels really, as you were saying, like all the codes were here and blatantly kind of expressed. So maybe it's kind of a clean slate, and then we'll see more.
I think we all want him to win.
Yeah, we do.
Definitely.
I think there was just very obvious nods to the archives, and I think everyone was so hungry for something that we were all very excited by. But
and what do you think about the use of color in the collection?
It was a lot. I think it was a lot. I loved some of the fuchsia moments throughout Helmut Lang's archive are my favorite. And I think there are moments where it's done really well here, but it's so oversaturated that it feels like a cheap gimmick.
I feel like the imagery was really, because in the video, some of the videos, the colors looked a bit more muted, but in the runway, the photos, they're just so bright, and like you can't, it just looks so cheap in the image, the color choice. But yeah, I mean, like you're saying, the Helmut Lang color moments were some of people's favorite, like the organza dresses that he was putting out in the 90s were beautiful. So there's obvious nods here again, and like the sash detail is obviously sometimes made in color in this collection, and same with Helmut Lang. So it was an obvious reference again to like drop these bits of color in. I don't like it because it doesn't make.
I hate the gold. I think the yellow is fine.
It just looks
gold
like disgusting.
It's just a color palette that is very cheap.
yeah, it's just a very off mustard. Actually, it's not quite. Can't quite actually place the yellow.
Yeah.
I think it looks more like hangover piss.
Yeah, or that.
Bit disgusting.
Stay hydrated, guys. I do enjoy this, like, I mean, in a way, that silk organza taxi print. I think
Let's
that's
talk
kind
about
of,
the taxi reference, actually.
I think it's
I just think we've seen enough taxis.
it's a lot to
Just
base a
done
collection off of,
taxis.
right?
I mean, this may be like a personal point of view, but for me, that almost went back to like as though it's like a bell, like a that was your reference, right?
But as well, the intro, there was the taxi that it was as well created in the 90s by Helmut Lang in a...
I think as a reference, it should have ended there. It shouldn't have.
The campaign
Carried on
Right.
into the.
people are going to attach to that, but to make a whole suit out of it in silk,
Yeah.
like, come on.
I think it's that whole thing of if you're going to pay homage to someone who is a master at marketing, then you need to be clever with your marketing.
Yes.
You can't just slap it on a shirt.
It was quite abrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he just wanted to bring that nostalgic vibe into the debut, but as you said, it was a marketing,
It's hard to be nostalgic when it comes to Helmut
Very
Lang
hard.
because
Yeah.
his legacy lives on through
Literally.
every fiber of fashion right now.
You can find the taxi ads, just search it on Google, that will give you nostalgia. We don't need a whole new video, just to
There
feel
needed
that.
to be a more clever way of approaching these references.
for sure. And as well, Peter just stated that he wants to dress New York. How do you think this strategic shift in fashion communication aligns with the brand's intended target audience?
I think we've been talking about Helmut Lang and we've been talking about his philosophy and why that kind of worked at that time. But what's philosophical now? What are we thinking now? Like, what is the moment now? Are we so sexed up today that like we'd have that same impact seeing someone slink down Fifth Avenue in a Helmut Lang suit? Because I don't think we're there as a culture and as a society.
I think some people would be really upset in New York if you made them wear these clothes. Even old Helmut Lang, I think people would be like, absolutely not. So it's a broad statement to make. Yeah.
Okay. And Helmut Lang's clothing had a unique impact on how it made people feel when worn, as we talked about before. Do you think Peter Du's debut captures a similar essence? And if so, how?
I want to say yes. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I don't think so.
I don't know if he's, capturing how people want to dress today. And I think that's the brilliance of Helmut Lang, was that he created the new casual uniform. He created clothes that you could just pick up on at a shop and incorporate into your wardrobe and actually live your life in it. I don't see any of the clothes in this debut like that.
But also it's really hard. I feel like
And yeah.
like the pressure of this is really, it's a first collection.
Yeah.
So
It's a shame because I think, the idea of Helmut Lang back then was to wear the full look. And in Peter Do's work, people do want to they want to buy the blazer, they want to buy the matching trousers, they want to get the shirt on his mainline brand. But it doesn't have the same feeling with this collection at all. And it's a tricky thing to do to make someone want to wear your entire look when you're putting like nice coats down the runway. But yeah, I think he's really struggled to capture that. The long thing in this is just too long, and the jacket just fits a bit off as well. It's just
The extended shirts,
Yeah.
like the sleeves, I think work really well with his brand and his silhouette. But here, I thought they just looked like cheap.
It doesn't really work.
There was a busyness to the whole show as well, even with the other models like zigzagging across. So these finer details that there was obviously so much love and effort put into, you actually didn't have time. If everyone was slightly more staggered, I think it would be less overwhelming. And I know that was obviously a nod to people walking the streets of New York and how wanted to dress New York, but it didn't translate well to me personally.
Yeah, I was so confused because I was watching the runaway on my laptop and there was everyone going everywhere and I was like,
Busy, very busy.
yeah.
it just depends on your message. I think if your message is maybe clearer, then it's also easier for someone who sees it to feel like I want to wear this. And I don't feel like there was a strong, clear message except the idea of obviously paying homage to the legacy of the brand.
Yeah. And what do you think about the poem written on the
I liked it. I actually really did like that. No? Yes?
I think it was really lovely. I think it was a really lovely gesture. I feel like it was out of place.
It's not really necessary.
No, it wasn't. I don't think it spoke. I think it spoke to a very superficial idea of what he wanted to get across about ideas of the American dream and what New York means to him. But I wish he just saved it for his own brand
Because an interview maybe.
Yeah, I get that.
Or like or a campaign after this. You don't.
I want to know who
down the
Peter
runway.
Doe is. I want to know his point of view. I want to know his vulnerabilities. But I want to see that evolution with his brand.
I think that he wanted to add depth to this. By that, I think there was, as you say, like a real sentiment to it, but it did come across surface level. But from first point of view, I did like it.
Yeah,
I do get what you're saying.
I think it's very beautiful, and I think it's a lovely way to incorporate that Jenny Holzer.
Reference.
Yeah, because I think there's phrase written down. He did a collaboration with an artist. I don't remember the name of the artist, but I think he is as well Vietnamese.
Yeah, Ocean
or
Vuong.
something. Yeah.
Incredible artist.
That's what you were saying. It's almost like if we are going there, like, can we expand on this?
On that, yeah.
And it just feels like
For sure.
Yeah, but it does. It's looped straight back to the busyness. There was so many things that were so well thought out, but they were just like a smorgasbord of everything thrown into one. And it's like, okay, how do I depict this and take the meaning from it for sure?
Yeah.
There wasn't much meaning in the clothes, but there was obviously, it's quite beautiful to see the poem and to hear about the story between the two. It's nice to invest in that, but
Even the soundtrack of the New York City streets, I thought was it's very beautiful. I think there was a lot of lovely ideas thrown into it. It's just a shame that the collection didn't go that direction.
I thought the music was quite pensive. It was almost like watching a film, and I felt that it was like, okay, what's coming next? And that was the excitement of this. It was a debut collection, and I thought the music was really spot on. That was something I really loved about the show for sure.
Yeah. And do you believe that drawing such strong inspiration from Lang's design is sufficient for the brand to kind of recapture the same level of relevance that it had in the 90s? Or alternatively, Peter Doe should be encouraged to kind of infuse its unique vision into the brand to kind of make it pertinent again in today's society with a more modern approach?
I think that's a challenge, right? It's a brand like this that realistically is like a decade worth of work that everyone is going to think about and go back to over and over again. Do you continue to put that front and center because it's on everyone's mind, or do you take the opportunity to really make it your own, to imbue it with your?
I think that's the only choice you should really take. We've had designers, we've had the brand try and dip back into the archive and make something special with the re-edition, and it was just cheap, and they picked the worst items to do it with, and it was just not the right choice. And this brand finished in 2006. I just think we need to just stop going back into the archive, stop remaking clothes that were so amazing. It's kind of like a disrespect to the sash detail. It's okay, why are we seeing it again? It's been done.
These companies should be fostering young talent and investing in these emerging brands and making them the names.
The new, yes.
Instead of resuscitating the same thing.
This looks like the colors from McDonald's, no? It's just, it's a mess. I think it's just unnecessary.
It's like the idea also of you deciding not to look at to go to the archive and look at it when you want to start your collection.
That's an active choice.
Exactly. So I thought it would actually go not totally different, but
something different.
Yeah,
anyways,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of.
Or at least don't tell us that, because now we know that you.
Yeah.
it gives us too much ammunition against the collection already, you know. So.
And do we think that Peter Do is going to be able to establish again that prominent position, or what?
I mean, we
Or
hope.
this?
Yeah, I
of
hope
course,
so.
we hope.
I really do hope so. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity for him to make Helmut Lang really his own, to kind of put his stamp on what everyday New York fashion is. And I think he does need to break the shackles from the archive.
Yeah, nobody actually wants to emulate. Like, I don't think like right now you want to have the same, because it's never going to be the same. It's its own history. So you kind of have to break free and try to create a new path, but within the same language.
Yeah, I think everyone loved so much Helmut Lang as a brand that everyone kind of wants it back, and everyone is hoping to have it back in a way, even though it's going to be a different approach, because of course the designer is not anymore there, but there's this new vision, and I hope that this vision will, you know, break through kind of. I hope Peter Do will, in the next collections or what, will kind of put a little bit of himself.
I mean, I hope it sells so we can actually see another collection, because if it doesn't, then
I think he'll learn
we're going to
from
be
this.
left with
though.
this, and then we're going to be like, oh yeah, that was the Helmut Lang, Peter Do, that was terrible.
Yeah. And given the brand's history, what are your expectations for Helmut Lang's future trajectory under Peter Do's leadership? Like, what's your future thoughts, general future thoughts on what this could be?
Growing pains into something really iconic.
I agree with that.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
That's a very good statement. Yeah.
I don't want to see another collection. I'd like to see Peter Do just embrace it more in his own brand. I think it was just really unnecessary appointment. I just think we just need to leave the brand alone. Like, you're hurting people's feelings, and you're making some people be mean to designers who are actually really great. I think it's a really tricky task for him to take on, and I like looking at his own collections. They are really beautiful. I mean, personally wouldn't wear them myself, but I can appreciate them for what they are. But you compare this to the Helmut Lang show, and you're just like,
I can see more tailoring here. I don't know. There's something that kind of like drives me to wear it, and the Helmut Lang collection did that impact. Let's say that.
there's looks from his own work that look more Helmut Lang than this Helmut Lang show.
Yeah.
It's the translation didn't make it through, unfortunately.
I think there's huge potential for growth and authenticity here, definitely.
For sure. Well, guys, that was kind of my last question. So thank you so much. It was a very fascinating topic, and as well very good points. So
At least 4 out of 5 of us are rooting for him.
yeah. Do you have anything else to
Should
say?
we round of applause for Peter
sure.
Do?
Yeah.